Here at Healthy by Nature, we get so many questions about zeolite and zeolite detox that we decided to jump in the car and go meet up with one of the nation's top zeolite experts. We were lucky enough to grab a coffee and a great conversation with Micah Portney, a pioneer of zeolite supplementation in his hometown of Waxhaw, North Carolina. Drop in on our sit-down interview now.
Good to be with you here. Thanks for showing up and meeting us here.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So, I thought I might start with, some of our viewers watching this may have never even heard of zeolite, or some may have heard of zeolite and not really know much about it. And for those people, how would you answer the question, why would I want to take zeolite?
That's such a loaded question. It's so broad, but I'll try and focus as much as possible as I can on that.
Yeah.
The reason why I want to take zeolite is a lot of our health system is based on dealing with symptoms and trying to treat symptoms, and it's really not the right way to approach things. A lot of things that we've done as mankind has created, and not only that, but naturally occurring as well, these heavy metals and toxins in the environment. And the body doesn't really know how to deal with those toxins and heavy metals. So what happens is they store in the fat cells. They don't know, the body doesn't know what to do with it. It's a very efficient machine, the body. So when it doesn't know what to do with it and it's storing it, you end up having these effects from it. And these effects can mimic symptoms of diseases, because basically what's happening is there's a couple of things. Besides the toxins and heavy metals, there's also pH. Our bodies are over 80% water, and anyone who's ever seen a swimming pool with the pH out of balance, it turns green, and things start growing in it. So our bodies, being mostly water, that's supposed to be this very efficient machine, doesn't function properly if the pH is out of balance. So between the toxins and heavy metals that the body doesn't know what to do with and is having symptoms regarding that, which can mimic anything. That could be, one person could have bad skin, another one could have pancreatitis. But the food we eat and stress on our bodies creates acidity, and foreign cells thrive in acidity. So it really leaves us open to basically attack, because our bodies aren't functioning the way they're supposed to, not as efficiently as it was designed to. And so our immune systems are suppressed. And so anything that we're exposed to, especially foreign cells in the environment, can grow in our body, which is why we have such this vast health crisis in the world right now. I mean, less so in Europe, I would think, because a lot of the food they eat is bad, and the water is still going through aquifers and things like that, which are much better than what we're doing here.
Yeah, they don't have the GMOs and chemicals.
That's correct. They're eating much better. So they're still getting those type of things, especially with toxins and heavy metals, which are in everything, including the soil, like I said, naturally occurring. So by using something like zeolite, which really works at the foundation of proper health, because it will help remove the toxins and heavy metals. It will help balance the pH, because it's an alkaline mineral. Now, what's something really interesting about zeolite that I learned not too long ago was, not only did they find that it will balance the pH, and notice how I'm not saying it's raising the alkalinity, because someone who has too high of an alkalinity, zeolite will buffer that and bring it back to balance, even though it's an alkaline mineral. So it's really, really an amazing mineral. But the foundation of it is everybody should be removing the toxins and heavy metals and balancing the pH. So all of these systems in our body, which are very finely designed to work together, can work in homeostasis. And so that's really where zeolite comes in. It's something everybody should be taking for making sure that anything you are dealing with, now I'm not saying there's not such thing as diseases and issues, but you'll know what's real and what's not if you first detoxify and balance the pH. And then, you know, if you're still having symptoms and things, then that's something that, you know, you should have looked at by a doctor. But what's really interesting is that I always tell people, because these symptoms mimic diseases, that when you're taking zeolite, people are like, well, you know, does it interact with drugs? And for me, that's not the scary part for me, because it doesn't really interact on a negative basis for most pharmaceuticals. But what can happen is if a person's taking drugs for a disease that they don't really have, but it's really something that was from toxins and heavy metals in their body, or their balance their pH being out of balance, then what happens is, as zeolite is bringing their body back into balance and these symptoms are starting to go away, then the drugs that they're taking are no longer necessary. And they could be in a situation where they're taking drugs that they shouldn't and are going to have effects from that. And so I tell people that they need to make sure that when they're taking zeolite, to pay attention to how they're feeling and paying attention to the dosing on the drugs with their health practitioner, making sure that if they need to lower it or get rid of it, that they do.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely important for people to know.
It's a long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, no, but it's a good answer, and you know, I mean, and I think that's good to know too, that you know, it's not like zeolite does treat anything in particular. It's really that you know, what they're experiencing may or may not be a result, but it could be a result. Like you know, really detoxing heavy metals and the other environmental toxins and chemicals is kind of a core foundational thing for good health. And so it's really good to do that. Well,
it's really interesting because people will contact us and be like, well, will zeolite help with this disease or issue? Well, the zeolite, and of course we can't say that because we're a dietary supplement company, but only drug companies are allowed to make disease claims, which is really ridiculous. But anyway, so they ask us those things, and it's, you know, the same type of response when people ask about side effects is, everybody reacts to toxins and heavy metals differently. Right. Same with the side effects, same with, you know, the results of the zeolite. Will it treat what you're dealing with? It depends on what's causing that. But the first way to know that is to detoxify and then balance the pH in your body, which happens over time. Zeolite does that over time. It's not like a drug, like, oh, I take this, I'm better, and now that's it, right? It is something that works over time, going through your body. It stays in your body between 6 and 8 hours, and then it leaves, right? So you want to be taking it over long term to balance the pH in your body and remove the toxins and heavy metals. And there's some very stubborn metals. And again, everybody releases the toxins and heavy metals differently. Yeah. So like mercury's a tough one.
That's one that's harder to detox. It takes longer.
Absolutely. I mean, even for zeolite, which is great at doing it, it doesn't matter what natural detoxifier you're using, mercury is a tough go, and it really takes time. So we tell people to take the zeolite for at least 90 days before evaluating anything, because then at least you're given time for it to balance your pH, to remove the toxins and heavy metals, including stubborn ones, and then kind of have a baseline from when they started, then after 90 days saying, do I feel better and what feels better? Yeah. And then, you know, determine after that if they're going to continue and do maintenance dosing, which I believe everybody should, because we're exposed to toxins and heavy metals on a daily basis. And again, food we eat here, especially in the United States, and stress on our bodies creates acidity. So you're constantly battling that.
Right. And you don't have to wait to feel bad until you take zeolite.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, because I mean, it's just a natural foundational supplement.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that is a natural mineral, right? That comes from the earth, and it's, you know, people are always relate to drugs and things like that, and we're like, no, it's like taking vitamins or mineral or something. It's especially this one.
I have a couple of questions I want to follow up on. And one has to do with mercury, because that's one that people are commonly having an issue with.
Yeah.
And so yeah, with mercury, we know that it often takes longer to detox. So if somebody takes, a zeolite powder, for example, and they're wanting to detox mercury, and after 90 days, they're like, well, I've only seen minimal change. I mean, would you recommend that sometimes it takes longer than that?
Yeah, I mean, the 90 days was just something we came up with to give people a standard for at least, for it to give it a chance to work. Because people have, some people have just unrealistic expectations for a natural mineral. So, we tell people to take it over long term, but like I said, mercury is a slow go. We've had people who, see slight progress and it continues, and they'll take it for a year or two and say, yeah, well, I mean, when I look from 2 years from the beginning, it's a huge difference, but I was very impatient during the time because it does take a long time. And once again, everybody releases it at different levels. Some people could get mercury out very quickly.
Yeah.
And others, it could be forever. I mean, which leads me to a question that people have, before I forget, is they ask if it will pull the mercury out of their fillings and weaken the fillings. And the answer to that is no, because you need the blood flow to be pulling it out, right? So you need the exposure to the blood flow. So anything that does leach out of the filling, that's when zeolite will take it. So
yeah, and I'm glad you addressed that, because that is a common question that people have, with mercury fillings.
Right, so it's not going to weaken. I still have some mercury fillings in my mouth. I've been trying to get rid of them, but I take zeolite. I just worry about those type of things less now. But yeah, I mean, my fillings have not weakened except over time, but it had nothing to do with the zeolite.
Yeah. So what would you say? Obviously, I mean, we've all known people that have had significant issues with heavy metals and other toxins and toxicity, and are experiencing a lot of symptoms due to that. But then, and so they may take steps, to detox using supplements or other, measures. But there's also people out there that say, no, the body detoxes on its own. You don't really need supplements, or you don't really need to do cleanses or any of that stuff, because the body detoxes on its own. So
yeah, that's not true. Like I said, the body will detoxify with the liver and kidneys to a certain extent. Yeah. But like I said before, the body doesn't know what to do with a lot of these toxins and heavy metals. They're foreign. They don't exist in nature. A lot of toxins don't. And, even some of the heavy metals. And so the body stores them in fat cells, like, well, maybe I'll need this later because I don't know what else to do with it. And so it stores it. And then the buildup of that, as we know, the body reacts as if it's poison. So any kind of you're burning fat or any kind of change in that molecular structure going on in there with fat cells can release the toxins and heavy metals. Even other natural detoxifiers. People will eat cilantro, spirulina, what's another good one? Chlorella, apple pectin, those type of things. Those are all natural detoxifiers. But what happens with those, and the reason why zeolite's very different, is that the body will react, because those things will pull the heavy metals and toxins out of the cell. And then your body's like, oh my God, I was just poisoned. And so your body reacts with side effects, diarrhea, headaches, all sorts of other things. And that also happens with zeolite if you don't take enough, which is interesting, right? It's counterintuitive, because if there's not enough cages, well, that's what why zeolite is different. It has a cage structure, so the negative charge, when it pulls the toxins and heavy metals out, will trap them in the cage, and then the body's not re-exposed. But if you don't take enough, then the body reacts as if it's poison, because the cages fill up, but there's more toxins and heavy metals that were pulled out. And so you'll see, there's people, it's really interesting, because people say, oh my God, I'm very sensitive to stuff, so they only take a little.
Right.
And
I think that's a lot of people.
Yeah, and so because they're used to drugs or other things that are very potent and or have side effects to them, so they get really nervous. And it's really counterintuitive with zeolite, because if you do that, like I said, the cages will fill up quickly. And I always use this scenario. If you're in a rock concert and coming out and 50,000 people are there and there's one bus to take everyone where they need to go, there'd be absolute chaos. Okay, people would be going crazy, right? Fighting in chaos, which you can, basically say this is the way the body reacts as if when it's detoxing, right? But if you have a fleet of buses and then 50,000 people come out and it's organized and it just keeps taking people to where they need to go, it's very efficient and it works properly. Yeah. And so that's the same thing with zeolite. If you have enough cages, when the toxins and heavy metals are pulled out of the fat cells, they're pulled into the cage, the body's not re-exposed, and you're less likely to have side effects. And that's why more is better when it comes to zeolite. And a lot of people that we've had who have come to us and said, oh my God, I had this really horrible reaction. And we're like, well, how much did you take? Oh, only a little, because I'm very sensitive. I want to make sure. And then we tell them, well, take a lot. And see what happens, and they come back like, oh my God, it worked. I didn't have any of the reactions anymore. I detoxed my body. I can't believe it. A lot of these things that were happening aren't happening anymore. And so, it's really, like I said, it's counterintuitive, but it's very satisfying to hear people having, results like that.
Yeah. So a big question I'm wondering is, I think all of us, had our days of maybe not eating the best and all of that, and then we have our own journeys that we go through.
We're all human.
We're all human, and we get healthier, and we come to discover things. And I'm curious, you're the pioneer of zeolite supplementation. Like, you really developed this thing, and I'm like, wow, how did you come to know about zeolite? How did you get started? How did this whole thing go down?
Well, that's an interesting story, because it's not a story of I was looking to save the world at all. It was actually, I came across an article that was talking about, I think it was even on CNN, something to do with Chernobyl nuclear accident. And that the Russians were using zeolite in the townspeople to remove the radiation and the toxins and heavy metals. They did it with the animals, the livestock, to reduce the radiation in the milk. They made it into cookies and were feeding it to the kids.
Oh, wow.
The Russians, they don't have anyone to answer to. They do what they want, right? It could have went really bad, so it was secretive. But when it didn't go bad, the information came out. And so what I believed is, I have something called Dubin-Johnson syndrome, and it's an extra enzyme in my liver, so I get very dehydrated. I'm not supposed to drink alcohol, but I went to college, okay? So, I drank when I was in college, and the problem is I get really bad hangovers because my body just doesn't react well to alcohol, doesn't process it at all. Yeah. So, knowing that the toxins in alcohol is what causes hangovers, I decided to try getting zeolite and using it in regards to alcohol. So I tried to use it as a preventative. I used it after the fact, and I did these different things. And what I found was, by taking zeolite before you drink alcohol, it removes the toxins from the alcohol, and you're less likely to get hungover. And so that's how I started. And I started the company with a hangover product. And there was only one other on the market at the time. It was something called Chaser. I don't even think it's out either anymore. And what I found was that it was an uphill battle. Although it worked for me and I wanted to give it to other people, it was a matter of people creating their own problem. And then you had, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. We're saying you're promoting drinking for college kids and all that stuff. And I was like, no, college kids are going to drink. It's allowing them to get to class in the morning instead of being hungover.
Right. You're not encouraging it.
Right. I'm not encouraging it. I'm helping them get to class at their 8 o'clock class instead of sleeping through it because they were drunk the night before. And so But we found that these were uphill battles. We actually were exporting it to China. China was using it with their citizens and things like that. And but again, it was an uphill battle. But as I did more research regarding zeolite, I came across a lot of scientific studies and a lot of different things that zeolite could do. Now, I also have IBS, so I have an issue with diarrhea, right? Yeah. Over my lifetime. My friends made fun of me when we were teenagers and in college because I had to go to the bathroom and they were always waiting around, and they, you know, it was a hard life growing up. Yeah, it's a hard life growing up as a kid dealing with that. And so I read a study in Cuba. They made a pharmaceutical drug called Enterex out of the natural occurring zeolite. Yeah. So when I read that, I decided to try it, and I partnered it with calcium and B12. People who have diarrhea lose a lot of B12, so they have low energy levels, and the calcium actually worked for being alkaline, so it increased the alkalinity. And so that would bring down the acid in the stomach. So I formulated that together to make a product which is now called Esdifan, and which is, I'll tell you how I used the name.
I'm wondering about that. Yeah.
Esdifan is phonetics. So ES is for the letter S, DI is for the letter D, FAN, right? So it's SDFAN is really what it is. Stops diarrhea fast and naturally.
Oh.
And it sounded very pharmaceutical, so I was like, okay, I'm just going to go with it. And it just took off. But I made that product specifically for me. And I was taking it with meals that I thought I was going to have a problem with, because, you know, I ate Chinese food, boom, I was in the bathroom afterwards, right? And I started finding that if I took it with the meals, I didn't have the problems afterwards. I also was hypoglycemic, and so my blood sugar would drop, and I would keep sugar pills. Now, zeolite also can balance blood sugar. All these things I was basically the guinea pig on, from all these scientific studies that I was reading done by universities who were just, you know, they had doctoral students who were just researching this stuff. And so that's how I started developing the products, and I really found that helping people was a much better direction and more satisfying to me than dealing with hangovers that people were creating their own problem. So I got rid of that product, and I really started focusing on helping people. And it started with myself by seeing all of these things that were going on. It's really interesting how things develop over time, and you know, basically trying to help yourself creates solutions for other people that I knew were dealing with this. And I have customers that have been around on Esdifan for 25 years since I put it out and started using it. And they are like, please do not ever go out of business, because it's the only thing that helps me.
It's the only thing that works.
Yeah, it's the only thing that works for a lot of people. It's the only thing that worked for me. I won't use, and I probably can't use the name of the drug in a video, but there's one out there that's a drug that stops diarrhea, right? And basically what that drug does is put a cork in it. And so now you're dealing with all the pains that you would normally have, but no way to get rid of it. And when I was younger, I found that I would rather not take that drug, because I'd rather be able to get rid of it with causing the pain. But the Esdifan, actually, the zeolite was able to stop the pains along with it. And so it's just a really phenomenal product that ended up having a great solution for myself and many other people. So it's really helped me with a lot of things. The blood sugar. Right, the blood sugar, the hypoglycemia. I used to get the jitters, and then I would crash, and I would really be in trouble. And ever since I started zeolite, I can, right now, I don't eat till maybe noon. And I'll go work out. I don't need anything, which is just weird. It's changed everything for me.
Yeah, and then I don't know if is there any research on that you're aware of?
Not that I know of. I know that it says that it balances blood sugar. But I don't know if there's any specific research. There's so much research that can be done on zeolite, but you know, it takes millions of dollars to do these clinical studies, and I would love to see that happen. You need to look at the body as a whole. And so if you say, oh, it gets into the bloodstream, and even though there are tiny amounts in the liquids, the powder, you're getting much more, and we already discussed why more is better, right, with zeolite, but with the particle sizes, what we figured out, and we're the only company that does this, to my knowledge, is that we have 80% of our zeolite powder is less than 10 micron, right? And people go back and forth about what can get into the bloodstream. Is it less than 5? Is it less than 10? Whatever. 80% of our zeolite is less than 10 micron. It should be getting into the bloodstream. We specifically, on purpose, left 20% from 10 to 40 micron, which we know is not going to get in the bloodstream. Now, why would we do that? Because the gut is a huge place for toxins and heavy metals to reside. So what happens? They have these smaller particle size, goes through the blood, gets it out, and then the gut just takes it and redeposits it back into the bloodstream. So you're going to merry-go-round. It's nonstop. So by doing an 80-20 split, we're focused on a full body detox. You're getting 80% going into the bloodstream. It gets into, crosses the blood-brain barrier, goes throughout the whole body, detoxing everything, right? Then the other 20% stays in your gut to pull out the toxins and heavy metals which are in your gut, and therefore won't redeposit back into the body. So you're not playing this merry-go-round type system.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and that's a big differentiator between ZeoHealth products and other products that are out there.
Right. Again, when you're dealing with a company who pioneered zeolite supplementation, and we've thought through basically everything from a science perspective, right, and a health perspective, versus these other companies who are all about marketing and all about making money, and whatever sells, we'll just say the buzzwords and those type of things. They really or, the smallest is better, and we get into the bloodstream faster, whatever they're peddling, right? But their deal is, a lot of them are multi-level marketing companies, that's what they do. They're marketers. So they want to bring in distributors, right? And they make their money off of bringing in more distributors, and then they're forced to buy product, and that's how you build an MLM company.
Right.
So
trying to have a unique angle.
Right, always a unique angle. We have a patent, we have this, we have that. Our doctor says this, our doctor says that, whatever, it's marketing, right? But our expertise is zeolite supplementation, and we pioneered it, and our focus is on how it best works in the body. We're a manufacturing company, we're about the products. That's our total focus, not marketing, not bringing in distributors, not, using the best buzzwords. We're about what's going to be best for people and what's going to help them the most and be the most effective. Why? Because I use it. My grandmother used it till she was 98 and a half, okay, and finally died. So my family uses it, my friends use it, and I care about everyone else using it. Because zeolite's so unique, and no one really knows this, but I'll tell you, just you. Don't worry about it. I knew, because zeolite was so unique, and that there was questions about the heavy metals in it. And I can get into someone who was an angel who helped me through it. But that always gets me teary-eyed, so I'm trying not to. But I knew that at some point, the government wouldn't understand, because the standard for testing of all dietary supplements is called a full digestive analysis, where you expose it to hydrochloric acid, break it down to its elements.
Which is really unnatural.
Right.
As far as human consumption goes.
Well, it depends on what it is.
Yeah.
For other things, that is how the body breaks it down. For zeolite, it's not. Zeolite isn't broken down in the body and remains intact. So that was an unfair evaluation of the product by doing a full digestive analysis. But when we did all that in the beginning, because we wanted to know what we were working with. And I was scared in the beginning. I didn't want to put it out, because I was like, oh my God, there's heavy metals in it when I break it down completely. But as I did more science, and I was talking to geologists and doctors and medical people and FDA consultants and all kinds of different things, And the geologist and the scientist and this person I told you about, this angel who basically had an expert for anything that I ever came across, any problem, and was such a sweet man. He actually made me believe that, you know, there are wonderful people on this earth, because my childhood, I really didn't believe that at all. But anyway, I knew at some point that the FDA was going to come to my doorstep. Yeah. And so from day one, I put away almost every dollar that I could from any money we made. And I had that at basically an FDA rainy day fund. And I was doing all the science and all the lab tests and everything I could to create that case. And it was basically 15 years of that, of me putting together all of this stuff and saving money before they stepped in and started attacking zeolite. And I had an FDA specialized lawyer for dietary supplements in Washington, D.C. And she looked at the stuff that we had and she said, I have never seen a dietary supplement company have this much science behind it. Like, what were you doing? And I said, I knew it was coming, because it's such a unique mineral and it's hard to understand the bioavailability of the heavy metals, that I knew that the baseline was full digestive analysis. So I knew it was going to happen. When they came, I was ready. And it was quite an interesting feat of how we got through that. But it took 2 years to get through it. What's interesting is the assistant attorney generals in California, who worked our case for 2 years, basically came back and said to my attorney that we made believers out of them.
So one question I have for you, and I know it's a question that you probably get a lot, and I certainly do from people, is, you know, people that have read some about zeolite and they're concerned about the heavy metals in zeolite. So could you speak to that a little bit? Should people be concerned about heavy metals being in zeolite, you know, itself? No,
I mean, it's what we ended up having to prove to the government. Yeah. Although zeolite, if you completely break it down, will show heavy metals in it, it's volcanic. It's come from the center of the earth.
It's like an aluminum silicate, something.
Yeah, it's called a sodium aluminosilicate. That's the name of the compound. Okay, yeah. But I always give an example like this. Okay. You have water, which is an H2O, right? So that's a compound and it remains intact. When we use it in our body, we use it as water. Right. The same thing with zeolite. That is a very, very strong compound. The only thing that can break it is pure hydrochloric acid, which is not our stomach acid. It would burn a hole right through it, right? Our stomach acid is not strong enough to break it down, or intense volcanic heat. Which none of us are thousands of degrees are going to be coming across. So that compound remains intact, and any heavy metal elements are bound in the structure. It's kind of like marbles in the cement, right? You wouldn't be able to remove marbles out of the cement, right? Because it's bound in that structure. So that's the same thing with any naturally occurring heavy metals in zeolite. They're just not bioavailable. There's nothing in the body that can release them. So the zeolite remains intact, the compound remains intact, goes through your body within 6 to 8 hours doing its job, and then is excreted.
Okay. So basically, people don't need to worry about adding more heavy metals to their body.
No, absolutely not. It's quite the opposite.
Yeah. So you have several zeolite products, ZeoHealth does, and I wonder if you could speak a little bit about those products, the individual products, and how they differentiate, but more importantly, I guess, what do they do, and then, like, you know, what is the purpose of them, and how they benefit people.
Well, it's interesting. I'll start by telling you this, because I love to anecdote everything. When I started the company, and I finally came out with the detox product after the, you know, hangover one that we did away with, and the Esdifan one. The other one was called Destroxin, right? And we only did capsules. Again, everything I did was focused towards me, which is an entrepreneur's mistake. But I was young and I was new at this and I had no idea. And really I was all about the science and everything else, but it came out to what was best for me. So the Esdifan was good for me, and then the Destroxin. I only want to take capsules. Who wants to put this stuff in their mouth? It's, you know, it's equivalent to sand basically. So I didn't come out with the powder, and I kept getting people asking me, can I just get the powder? I don't want it in capsules. And I was like, why do you want to put that in your mouth? And what ended up happening was I finally came to the conclusion that who am I to tell people what they want? And I made the Zeolite Pure powder, the 400 gram, and that became our best seller. And so it's just a huge lesson for entrepreneurs to listen to people and don't go by what you would want or feel. But it's funny now because now I take the powder. So
yeah, I do too.
Yeah. So, but that wasn't my first instinct. I thought capsules would be easier for people. So
yeah, I mean, and people can really take, you know, more therapeutic doses. I mean,
exactly, it's just more economical with the pure powder rather than capsules. Capsules are formulated and you have to encapsulate them, and it just ends up being more of an expense. I mean, it's great for people who want the convenience of having capsules and travel with it, and you know, or don't want to drink the powder. So, and they're formulated for different things, which is what you asked. So I'll get back to that. So we have the Zeolite Pure powder, then we have the Esdifan, which is to stop diarrhea.
Yeah, which I was going to add, by the way, I didn't tell you this. The other day, I had a good friend that contacted me and said, you know, I got food poisoning. I'm having diarrhea, I'm having vomiting. And she's like, do you have anything? You know, and I was like, you know, I kind of looked through everything. It's like, you know, I have zeolite powder. So I gave her the zeolite powder. And you know, she told me the next day, she's like, wow, I feel a lot better. Really helped with vomiting, helped a lot with nausea, and helped a good bit with diarrhea, but I still have some. And then I discovered the Esdifan. I was like, I have Esdifan. I gave her that, and
it was gone.
It was gone. Yep.
Yeah, it's really interesting because my significant other, my wife, she basically had diarrhea one day and said, oh my God, she was in so much pain, just horrible. I mean, those of us who grew up with it, with IBS, it's no big deal to us, but for someone who doesn't really deal with that, it was horrible for her. So I gave her the Esdifan, and she took the Esdifan. She's like, oh my God, it's completely gone. It really works. I was like, of course it really works. What do you think? I was selling something that didn't work? She's like, I don't know. I just never really paid attention to it. But she's like, now that I've used it, it really works. I'm like, I know. It really does work. Now she's a believer, right?
Yeah.
So then we have the Destroxin, which I really originally formulated for as a general detox, but I did the calcium and the B12, which I did in the Esdifan. But I decided to do it for the Destroxin as well because a lot of people who were asking about it were people who were dealing with chemotherapy.
Yeah.
The after effects of chemotherapy was a lot of the people who were coming to us in the beginning. And so the B12, I said, look, it's good because it'll give them energy, and the calcium will help with settling their stomachs because they were all very nauseous. So I'm like, I'm not going to modify that much. And so I left the Destroxin similar to Esdifan. The Esdifan difference is that the particle sizes are larger to stay in the gut. So I took the powder from the Pure and then did similar formulation with the B12 and calcium. And people were, the after effects of chemo or radiation treatment, they were astonishing. The results. People like, my nausea is gone, all this stuff is gone, this is amazing. And so really that was a lot of our sales in the beginning, were people who were going through those chemotherapy and radiation treatment. Then you have the Zeolite-AV. Now that's an interesting story. Dr. Howard Piper, who is an independent expert on zeolite supplementation, he wrote a book. That's how we ended up knowing him. He wrote a book on zeolite, and he came to us to ask a lot of questions and talk about it while he was writing the book. And he said to me, you know, I use humic acid with my patients. And he said, I can't tell you what he said because the video would make a claim for us, so I can't really, but Basically that it was an extraordinary immune booster that he was using with his patients. And he said, you know, this would really go really well with Zeolite if you partnered together. I'm like, well, I'm not just going to do that because you say it. I'm going to check it out. So I did a lot of research. I did a year's research of the humic acid, the different humic acids. Some had the really strong immune boosting capabilities that Dr. Piper talked about, which, by the way, he tells the real thing in his book that I can't say now. But after working with him and doing all this research, we realized that together, see, zeolite is a detoxifier, but somewhat of an immune booster, and because it's a detoxifier. The humic acid is an extreme immune booster and has a little bit of a detoxification power to it. Yeah. So by combining them both, which is what he said, you would have a really, really strong product for people's immune system. And so we ended up doing that after a year of all the research, and it's been tremendous. Dr. Piper used it with all his patients. He loved it. Then we have the Royal Detox.
Yeah.
The Royal Detox is because a lot of people were saying, hey, but I take, you know, can I take chlorella and spirulina and apple pectin and cilantro, because those are all natural detoxifiers. And they all have affinities for different heavy metals. So I said, yeah, you could, but you're going to have the side effects from that, right? And I came up with, you know what, if we put them all together in a product and then added the zeolite, which would pull in the toxins and heavy metals that the rest of them were pulling out as well, then you wouldn't have the side effects from using those other natural detoxifiers. And it would be a good partnership with the zeolite to be a very comprehensive detoxifier. And that's how I developed Royal Detox. And so that's, that one is a really interesting one. And it's really starting to gain traction because a lot of people will use that as the initial basis for detoxification, you know, 30, 60 days in, and then they'll switch to the powder. Or even add the powder in with the Royal Detox while they're taking that. One dose of the powder and then the rest of Royal Detox, and then eventually move over to the Zeolite Pure and use it as a maintenance after the 90 days.
Yeah.
The last product is called Zetox. And this was initially something that I didn't want to do. But I found that we were in a very unique position. All of the misinformation regarding the MLM companies with the liquid zeolites, they ended up, by the way, the initial MLM who started the whole zeolite, liquid zeolite stuff, the chief science officer, we're frenemies, okay? And he's no longer with the company, but he's the one who came up with the whole concept of the liquid zeolite thing. And even him now will tell you, you can't liquefy zeolite, it's a suspension. I'm like, I know, that's what I've been saying this whole time. So he even admits to that now. But I decided, because of all the misinformation and that small amounts of zeolite in the liquids, that these people were brainwashed. Oh, we were part of the MLM, we only want the liquids. And they're very expensive. Why? They got to pay all their distributors. Everybody gets a piece. So we came out with the Zetox because I wanted to give something that was, it's 50 times more zeolite than most of the other liquid zeolites on the market. And it's a suspension product. And we put B12 in there and we put D3, we want some immune boosting capabilities in it. But really it's been something for people to get better than the liquid zeolites they were getting. It's still liquid, so they're willing to try it. And then when they were seeing the results from that, I used that to leverage it into the powder. So I'm like, if you really like the results for that, which is, you know, 1/3 of the price of the other liquids, and it's 10 times more effective, then if you really want to see the results, you should go to the Zeolite Pure powder. Yeah. And so basically, people use that as an introduction product if they've never used zeolite before. They use it as a convenience product that they're, you know, to take on trips with them and have in their purse or whatever, because it's very small. And a lot of people have been using it with their kids. We don't make statements regarding it, but it's been an especial certain population of children has been very effective with. There's a lot of buzz about that right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different reasons for that. A lot of people say that specific population has to do with heavy metals and things like that, which is why that population exists. And so people have seen tremendous amount of results with the Zetox.
So another question I have here is, there's a lot of detox products out there that people may take for detoxing all kinds of things. Activated charcoal is a big one. Also bentonite clay, diatomaceous earth, some people will take in that case. And what would you say differentiates zeolite from these? Like, why would somebody want to take zeolite instead of one of these products?
Well, the first thing I would say is charcoal is like a sponge. I only suggest that people take something like charcoal in an emergency situation, like overdosing in drugs, like they use it in the hospital. Personally, it's constant use of that will remove beneficial nutrients in the body, which you don't want to do. Yeah. Zeolite is very specific. It goes by atomic weight. And so it really focuses on the heavy metals. We also preload it with potassium and calcium. And so it's not going to swap out those things unless it has something it has more of an affinity for. So it's not going to be taking out anything positively charged that's beneficial. So that's what makes zeolite very different than charcoal, because charcoal is just a sponge. It basically takes everything and just leaves. Zeolite's very specific to heavy metals and toxins. It does not take out, and people always ask this question, do I have to take minerals? Do I have to take other vitamins? Is it going to interfere with all that stuff? No, it doesn't. Not at all. So zeolite, which makes it unique, is that it specifically focuses on the toxins and heavy metals, and it does not pull out the beneficial minerals.
And how about bentonite clay? So why would somebody want to take zeolite instead of bentonite clay?
Well, two things. Clay is again more towards the sponge type structure. Clay pulls a lot of everything, even though that it's positively charged bentonite. It's one of the other few minerals on the planet that's positively charged. But being a clay, it's again going to take in other beneficial things, and it's also not going to be as specific as zeolite is. Bentonite is beneficial, but it's not as specific as zeolite is. If I'm explaining that well, it's zeolite has other benefits to it. It has the alkalinity, it has the cage structure, which makes sure that the body isn't re-exposed to any of the toxins or heavy metals. It's very specific in what it pulls. So a clay is very different. It's more. It doesn't have the structure that the zeolite does, and it's not as specific as the zeolite is.
So one thing that really isn't talked about a lot is zeolite being used for pets. Can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah, absolutely.
All the scientific studies were originally done on pets. There's a scientific study done on dogs that's published in the U.S. National Library of Medicine for a variety of health issues. So with that, zeolite can absolutely be used with pets. I used it with my cats. I used it with dogs, just like the scientific study did. So a lot of people do. You can mix it with their food. With my dogs, I made homemade dog cookies with it. And one thing you should know, which is very important, that I had to experiment with, I figured maybe could replace some of the flour with it when you're making the cookies. No, you don't. You just add the zeolite to the recipe, and it works like a charm. Oh. So you don't try and substitute flour or anything else, because zeolite's a powder, I figured maybe, but it's not true. It didn't work. So it worked just by putting in zeolite with the regular recipe, and I made dog cookies. They absolutely love them. And you can, you just take however much you put in the recipe and how many cookies you get out, you divide that. But I was getting something like 100 milligrams a cookie. which was pretty good.
Yeah. So for our viewers out there that are interested in using Zeolite for their pets, is there any good information out there to give them guidance for that?
Yeah, well, there's Dr. Piper, who's an independent expert on zeolite supplementation. He wrote a book on zeolite supplementation, and in that book he has a section on pets. In addition, he has a website where he makes therapeutic dosing recommendations for both humans and pets is on there as well. That website is zeolite-dosing.com.
Great. When people think of detox, they often think of, detox can be pretty rough. Can you tell me a little bit about why is zeolite a good way to detox without having a lot of side effects from it?
Well, other natural detoxifiers have side effects because when they pull the toxins and heavy metals out of the fat cells, then what happens is the body reacts as if it was just poison because there's nothing to carry them out. And that's where the side effects come from. With zeolite having a cage structure and a negative charge, it basically pulls the toxins and heavy metals into the cage so the body's not re-exposed to them. And so that's why you have very limited chances of side effects.
So Micah, can you tell our viewers where they can find your products and how they can find out more information about ZeoHealth?
Well, they can go to our website, which is zeohealth.com. It's Z-E-O, like zeolite, health.com. And we also have another store called Regal, R-E-G-A-L, supplements.com with an S. And on that website, the product page have like discounts and things like that for multiple bottles. So it allows people on that site to see a little more people who have been using it already and want to try and get further discounts. And Amazon, the Amazon store is really good pricing as well. And all of our products are on Amazon.
Well, Micah, pleasure as always. Thanks so much for meeting and hanging out today. Very informational, very informative. So thanks so much.
Appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah.